What does it mean to be a best friend? Well, today I want to share with you a story about a girl who grew up with an unshakable, relentless belief that she was not enough. You see, we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. So how we feel on the inside has a direct impact of what shows up for us in our external world. And for that girl, all she saw were all of the endless ways and countless reasons for which she wasn't enough. The evidence stacked and stacked and stacked. You see, our thoughts are extremely powerful, and the words we speak to ourselves matter. Because the words we speak and the thoughts that we cultivate create the beliefs that we start to form about ourselves. And our beliefs become the story in which we start to live, the story we start to write about ourselves. That girl, when she spoke about her experience and what she was experiencing, she explains that it was like being thrown into the middle of the ocean, wave after wave after wave crashing over her head, all while trying to stay afloat with weights attached to her ankles. It was monotonous, it was exhausting, and it was tiring. And the one reason why she didn't ask for help, and the one reason why she didn't say how she was feeling, is because she didn't want to be a burden, but most importantly, because she didn't want to be the reason that somebody else might be in the middle of the ocean with weights attached to their ankles, trying to stay afloat. So she stayed silent. At the age of 19, however, those waves, they became too much. They became too monotonous and they became too exhausting. And at the age of 19, she had the very first attempt to end her life. She believed at that time the only choice that she had at that moment was to end her life. One choice. Having failed her first attempt, she tried again 2 weeks later. She failed that one too. And at that point she said to herself, can't even do this right. Of course I'm not enough. She was okay for a while, she was treading water, she was getting by, but those weights attached to her ankles and those thoughts that she was having just became, again, too much. And at the age of 22, she had the third and final attempt to end her life, to end her story. Because at that time, she really truly believed that her mind was broken, that she was broken, and that nothing she could ever do would fix her, would save her. That this would always be her life, that she would always have that ebb and flow, that up and down, and it would always be so tremendously exhausting. The third and final attempt to end her life. The story that I'm telling you today, and the girl in that story, is me. Before I go forward with that story, I want to take you back to the age of 22, having just survived my third attempt to end my life and to end my story. And I woke up in a hospital bed. And one of the very first questions that I asked myself, the very first question, why do I have to be here? Why does this have to happen? Before I could even conjure up the answer to that question, my gaze fell to my left-hand side. And I'll add a little disclaimer, I might shed a little tear here. But my gaze fell to my left-hand side, and sat there beside me was my incredible mother. Exhausted, pain very visible on her face, in bits. And I realized, you caused that, Ciara. And while I could visibly witness that pain, it was a wake-up call, because I could see the pain that I would have endured upon her had I been successful. And it was a pain that was very familiar to us already as a family. Because 21 years previous to this, to the very month, in fact, my dad had lost his life and ended his story and lost his battle to his mind. And here I was putting her through the exact same thing all over again. So I said to myself, Ciara, you have two choices here. You can keep going the way that you're going, not talking, not opening up, not asking for help. Or you could talk. And the most profound thing I realized in that moment was, for the very first time in my entire life, I realized I had a choice. A choice to write a new story, to continue to write my story, in fact. A choice to choose a new meaning for how I wanted my life to go. So I went all in. One decision, to talk or not talk. And I chose to talk, and I chose to go all in my life. There was a lot of therapy, of course. But I also knew that aside with the therapy, I also had to make a decision to become my own best friend. And what did that mean? So I reflected on what it meant to be a best friend, or I also thought about the relationship I had in my life and the people I considered to be my best friend. Why did I consider them to be my best friend? Because I know I can trust them. Because I know that they will be there for me if I need them. I know that they will be honest with me. I know that they care about me, and most importantly, they speak to me with kindness and love. And when I reflected on that answer, I realized the one person that hadn't been that person to me was me. Hadn't been showing up for myself, hadn't been there for myself, and I most definitely wasn't speaking kindly to myself. So today, I want to share with you the 3 steps that I took back then, but also continue to take on a daily basis, that saved my life. The first step was to build a solid foundation of self-trust. Because I had to learn to trust myself. I had to learn to know that I had my own back. Because I hadn't had my back for a long time. I hadn't been shown up for myself. I hadn't at all. So how did I build self-trust? Well, one of the very first things and the quickest way to build self-trust, I thought, was to start doing the things I said I was going to do for me. This might have been something as simple as, today I promise myself I'll go for a walk. And no matter how I felt, no matter who I was with, no matter what I was doing, I had to make sure that I followed through on that promise. Because prior to this, all I did was let myself down. I would let my mind control me and say, no, you're too tired and you're too this, and what's the point? But I wanted to go all in my life. And I wanted to build self-trust. So the quickest way for me to do that was to follow through on those promises, the small promises that you make every single day. The second step was that I tuned into the power of choice and intention. Prior to this, every single time I used to wake up in the morning, one of my very first questions to myself was, why do I always have to feel like this? What's wrong with me? Every morning, I would ask myself that question. What is wrong with me? Why do I always have to feel like this? And my emotions were controlling me. From the very first thing, the very first time I opened my eyes in the morning. A simple change, a choice, backed by intention. I changed that question to, Ciara, how do you want to feel today? And what are 3 small actions you can take today to give you those feelings? Today, I'll share with you confident, courageous, and self-assured. And I think by standing on this red spot, that's my 3 actions in one go. That's enough for me today. Every morning, without fail, this is how I start my morning. How do you want to feel today? And what are 3 small actions you can take? And that put me back in the driver's seat of my life. That put me back in control of my emotions. And that's a pretty nice feeling. Yes, there are down days, but I think about how do I want to feel, and I push myself back up. And also, those actions tie into step number 1, building that self-trust. The third and final step that saved my life and continues to save my life, and probably one of the most important steps, one of the most vital steps, is I started to speak to myself like somebody I loved. Every single time I had a negative thought about myself, and this took work, every single time, I would ask myself, would you say this to somebody that you loved? And if the answer was no, which it was a lot, I made a choice and I intentionally created a more positive, empowering, affirming statement about myself. Was it uncomfortable at the start? Absolutely. But it works. Every time I would say, would you say this to somebody that you loved? So powerful. Every single one of you sitting here today were born to leave your fingerprints on history. And I empower you to take my story today and know that you hold the pen. You are the person who writes your story. You don't have to end your story. You continue to write the chapters. There will be some chapters that are filled with despair and maybe you feel like you don't have any hope. But there is always a choice to write a new chapter. There is always a choice to keep writing. In 2 days' time, it will be the 17th of October. And 8 years ago, on the 17th of October, my story could have ended. My life could be over. And I bring that moment back to that one choice. My mind was eventually going to kill me. And that one choice to go all in life led me to not only here, but living a life that I'm now no longer my own worst enemy, but I am actually, and I'm happy to say that I'm my own best friend. And I am truly living. And the other day I realized that I thought, and I looked back and said, I could have missed the rest of my life. Standing normal Sunday in the kitchen, could have missed this. So if you're struggling today, please know that this is just a bit in your chapter and that you can make a choice and that no matter how you're feeling, no matter how much hope you feel like you don't have, you can make that choice to rewrite that chapter or even write a new chapter and continue your story. I am literally living proof that you were one decision away from changing the entire trajectory of your life. Imagine, just for a second, what your life would look like if you showed up for yourself, if you spoke to yourself, if you were kind to yourself, and most importantly, if you loved yourself the exact same way you love somebody else. The choice is most definitely yours. Thank you.